Welcome, everyone. Today, it is my great pleasure that I have Angelo Robles. And Angelo, you are the second time on my Global Wisdom Talk, and I'm more than happy to have you because I'm a great follow you on YouTube and all your other social media channels. And I'm a great believer, and I enjoy your videos and your, in many cases, provocative perspectives on the families, on the family wealth, and on the wealth management industry. Let's call it this way, but it is requested, right? It is just the time for many wake up calls because we have another generation standing in front of the door and they are knocking and they will walk through the door and they have a other inspiration and other aspiration to change something. And therefore, um, it is my pleasure to have you in our today's talk. And for all the listeners today, we will spend today the time together to discuss this very important topic on multi-generational continuity. And why is this so important? Because it is so important. Why? Because the new generation of family members, these inheritors, these daughters, these sons, these siblings, they are in the wave of these $100 trillion wealth transfer. They are raising other questions as their parents have done. They are not only focused on preserving the capital, they are shifting their focus on, yes, preserving the capital and growing the capital, but mainly also focus to growing and preserve the family. So once again, Angelo, it's my pleasure to have you in our today's talk.
Jan, I always enjoy our discussions. Thank you for the opportunity for me to be on. I appreciate it, and I look forward to providing some value. You mentioned provocative, I guess. I don't think I'm actually that provocative, but in an industry that tends to be down the middle, what I call vanilla and sometimes a little boring, and not challenging assumptions, not I've done some videos about the word experts, which is not a word that I like because I like to be open-minded. I like to think first principles. I like to think for myself. And if that makes it provocative, then so be it. But it's a shame that it has to stand out as that when I'm just simply someone who likes to, I don't care who you are, a so-called expert. What does that really mean? What are you letting ego and ignorance get in your way? Where's your open-mindedness? Are things that black and white? And really, almost everyone that talks to me, and I dabble a lot in politics and geopolitics within the family office world, everyone is trying to spin you. Everyone. So you really have to break things down. But again, thank you for having me on.
That's great. So let's jump in our discussion today. And I will raise the question today, Angelo. What is actually multi-generational continuity? Because I mean, a lot of people talk about multi-generational continuity and governance and family offices and stuff like that. But if we can take a look from just as a holistic point of view, if we can have a bird view of the family itself, what is actually required from your experience? I mean, you have done an exceptional work over the last couple of years and decades. What are the main requirements? What have you seen in the past, in your experience, that makes families successful on the multi-generational continuity issue?
I mean, it effectively comes down to the foundation of governance, which is how decisions are made. And really, in achieving family continuity, it defines the ability to sustain a legacy across multiple generations. Now, that sounds good and simple on the surface, yet the reality, by looking through the statistics and firsthand, I've been traveling the world in this community for near 20 years. Jan, you've been around a while. We just see often things that don't work out as well as planned. And it doesn't mean that there's not a document. It doesn't mean that it wasn't thought about, yet there appears to be a lack of communication, a lack of iteration because things change, and a lack of accountability, really from both sides, the elders and the rising generation. So I often hear the word purpose. What is your family's purpose? It's a great question to ask. The mistake that a lot of people make is, well, we're rich, it's wealth preservation. Preservation is a method, it's not really a mission. So this comes down again to what I said about understanding what's the identity of the family, what's the purpose of the family, and where's the unity? Are we going to be better together or separate? And without communication, open and honest communication, it's very, very hard for families to sustain at the level they want to with the purchasing power they had at their peak over generation after generation. Now, there's so much nuances in what I noted. I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask some questions within there, but there's reasons why over the generations, as we research and our eyes tell us this, that there is challenges. The old adages that we always hear within 3 generations. Now, there's some that would argue that has been overblown. There's new research. I hear it. We should always be open-minded. But I also have to go with my eyes in 20 years, understanding the Middle East, Asia, LATAM, North America, Europe. This seems to be universal. Why are there such grave challenges in passing on the torch, in teaching wealth generation, in love within the family, identifying purpose, having a family constitution? But even when you have that, if you don't communicate and you don't listen, you don't iterate, like it likely is not going to have the level of success that you want it to. Jan, I'll give it back to you.
Many thanks. So I will add maybe this some interesting point, and that was just a little wake up call for me. There's a great book out there, and there's a clear recommendation for this book, and the book is called The $100 Trillion Wealth Transfer. And the book is written by Ken Koster. He is just in South African, but he lives in London and in South Africa. Ken was the former chairman of Lazard and the European head of UBS. But that is just not so important today. The book, what he have written was just, he have made a deep dive what these wealth transfer, what we are facing now, really means, because very few people talk about the real challenges for the society, but for the families itself, because the most people talk only about the money, the sum, whether it's 100 trillion or 140 trillion, or I don't know. In the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. And I had a discussion with Ken about, I came across the term and the question, who we will see in replacement of the traditional elite families through these wealth transfer. And I had a discussion with him, and I was asking him whether he has seen some families that are underway through this wealth transfer to take a place on the new table of a new league of elite families. And he said to me, yes, that is underway. Nobody talks about this. And on the matter of this, these new generation have very little in common with their parents' generation, and they raise other questions. And I will give it the ball to you in regards, what is your outlook on what will be the result maybe in the next decade? What kind of changes, what kind of implication we will see through these wealth transfer? Because in my view, that's the first large wealth transfer in history, what we see in these numbers. And the second is waiting around the corner. What is your perception? What is your outlook? What will we see on family offices, on the families itself? Yes, we will see a lot of more families with significant wealth. What does it actually mean?
Families of wealth in their family offices kind of look at it. They're probably, and I hinted at this in my first comment, they were designed for capital preservation, long-term growth, and the perspective of multi-generational continuity. But in a relatively, now I do use that word loosely, relatively stable economic and political landscape. That world no longer exists. Now, this comes back a little bit to governance, to purpose, to understanding the things that we originally kind of started with in our conversation. Uh, I think Matt Wesley, and of course the work of Christian Stewart, and obviously Jay Hughes, and their talk about capacity and capability within the rising generation, they do a much better job of explaining the context and nuances of that. Although I think in me bringing that up, capacity within the family and capability, the skill set, are relatively straightforward. What they bring up, and others have brought up before, is who's dedicated within the family and the family office to 100% to the family, not necessarily to a taxes or estate work or investing, all very important. And I get it, probably a little more exciting to most people. Well, I don't know if I can make taxes that exciting, but there needs to be what people describe. And I think Christian Stewart maybe has done the best writing on kind of a chief learning officer, someone 100% dedicated to the family. I find that there's so many important topics that people don't want to bring up. And this causes internal stress, both with the elders and what we'll loosely define as the rising generation. I think Jeff Bezos actually had a great comment. Stress comes from ignoring things you shouldn't be, not from hard work. You have to put in the work. You know what needs to be done, yet somehow, I guess it's human nature to procrastinate, to make excuses. And I started off my comment talking about, in your second question there to me, that we're the family and the office, meaning the family office, are built for kind of a world that, from my perspective, no longer exists for the reasons that I noted. It's an interesting, to say nicely, time in the economic and political landscape. Everything is changing rapidly. Now, trying to bring it back a little bit to the core focus on governance, but I'm happy to go in multiple different directions there. There's some other adages. It's not always what you see, what you don't see that destroys you. It's what you see and fail to act on. And one of the stories I tell at my event is the story of the Detroit auto industry. America in the 1950s and 60s was thriving. Those were about the largest, most successful companies on earth. And Japan, not even 2 decades out of losing World War II, was able to creep up. And Detroit, what I call the Detroit paradox, the executives saw it coming and they did nothing. The US auto industry grew stagnant, Japan innovated and dominated the US in the 70s and 80s. I could argue into the 90s. Now, things are different now. Of course, Germany has a great auto industry. China's intriguing, and obviously Tesla here in the US. So we don't need to make it a discussion per se. We could if you want, Jan, but
Yeah.
about the auto industry. But the moral of the story is we often see things coming. I mean, we're really not stupid. We're actually smarter than we give ourselves credit for. But we elect to put our head in the sand. We elect to do nothing. And these are the same things that I'm seeing now from the majority of families when it comes to AI, especially the executives who might be a little bit older. In ego, ignorance, and fear. All normal human emotions. You go through them. I do. We're humans. We're biological creatures. But that doesn't mean they're good per se. And that creates challenges for sometimes seeing the obvious, ignoring it, and not doing anything with it. So there's no easy answer to really connecting your first one or two questions. If it was easy, every family would do it. Creating wealth, maintaining legacy, continuity. I think there's certain principles that are very, very important, but it's going to vary and the nuances from family to family. Maybe I will come back to communication. Communication is very, very important. A breakdown of trust and a lack of communication, which a lack of communication or the wrong or harmful communication or lying could lead to the breakdown of trust. And you talk about the areas of, I would go back to maybe mission and vision maybe being really a shared vision, a shared idea of what the future could be and how we could be impactful to our family, our community, our country, society, humanity as a whole. So, Jan, like problems are going to be endless. There will always be new ones. So, the issues of having open communication, engaging the rising generation. Now we could get into some nuances, top down versus bottom up. I think the answer is pretty obvious. If you're a newly created family unit of wealth, whatever, a husband and wife and a child or two, it's a very limited volume of participants. Top down is initially how it always starts and actually works potentially effectively and very efficiently because it's very quick in terms of making decisions. But what happens in more complex family units? More children. Uh, who knows? I don't know. Aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews. Complexities begin when the unit starts to expand or over the generations. And if all the family sees initially growing up and through their teen years and maybe 20s is top down, then that's going to lead to problems. There needs to be a transition from top down to bottom up. There needs to be more inclusion. Now, I don't believe in inclusion strictly for the sake of inclusion. I think the value comes from their participants in the family, the legacy that has been, and the future that they look to have. And their voice needs to be heard. They need to learn. They can't be overly sheltered. This causes rigidity. This makes the word stewardship sometimes an ugly word to them, one with burden and pressure. And then I talk a fair amount about courage, a lion's heart, or the lack thereof, because of the fear of failure. A child has to learn to run by falling, has to learn to ride a bike by having some struggles. Since you're European, Jan, what you call, and most of the world calls football, we call soccer in America, you have to get out there on the field. You have to experience challenges, setbacks, failures. This player is better than me. But how do you get better? How do you persevere? How do you work on what needs to be worked on? It's not as intuitive or born into you, I think, as much as people think. A lot of it is the effort, the perseverance, the work, the dedication, and the accountability that we hold ourselves to that allows us to achieve within the unit of the family, which is primarily our discussion today, that we want to. Sorry for the long
Oh, that's
response.
fine. That's fine. And I would like at some important point. What I often see is just it is inertia. Inertia holds also in many families back from them what they maybe become, and
Mhm.
these becoming is also a very interesting point. What I'm focused on over the last couple of months is, I mean, if we are able to change our vocabulary, that's the first, let's call it this way, first entry point to change something. And I will give you just, maybe it is a challenge, but also I give you just an inspiration, and my view on this is the term legacy. Yes, many people use the term legacy, but if you make a deep dive on this word legacy, and what it actually means is, on the one hand, you see many families paying a lot of money to legacy consultants, what they call themselves. And if you talk to family members, especially from the newer generation or from the rising generation, often comes up that they say, listen, the legacy itself is a very selfish thing, because anyone have created this, and it is now up to me to I should evolve this, and there's a lot of responsibilities and stuff like that. Number one. Number two, data told us that very few legacies are very successful over generations. And the legacy itself, by and large, is in many families planned from the past. And maybe that's a great threat for the family itself, because what you're doing actually, if the past is shaping the present, what you are doing, you repeat your past over and over and over again. And it brings a lot of bad discussions, tensions, and conflicts. And the future, what you want to achieve, is by and large a byproduct, but is not the goal what you want to achieve. And if you change the term and say, coming back to your point, and I'm totally agree with you, it's just a question, okay, for what is our family actually standing for the next generations? What is our purpose? You name it, a purpose. And what is the thing or the things what we want to change over generations? What is it actually? And maybe you are capable of to plan or to shape your present from the future. Then you maybe come to the conclusion that what you are doing today is, excuse me for this, nonsense or bullshit, and it should be reviewed and stuff like that. So that is what I often recognize, and it brings me also. Let's take a spotlight for a minute or so on the family office. I know exactly, or I know it very well, that you are just an expert generalist. I don't call you just an expert generalist, because you have a deep view and a broad view on this very interesting and important topic. Is I will give you just this as a ball to you. When is a family office actually a family office? Because the whole majority of family offices around the globe are investment offices, and the missing link is often the family, and they are not serving in the most majority the family. So, what is your view? When is a family office actually a pure family office?
Like you stated, most family offices are truly more investment and tax offices for the benefit of that one family. And I hinted earlier when I mentioned the importance of capacity of capability, and it's best to have a chief learning officer, someone who's totally dedicated effectively to the family. And that really now begins to define that word family and the word family office, and it is there. Before I continue, just one, not a correction. I appreciate your kind words to me, and I have great respect, and thank you so much, Jan. But I am a little bit allergic to the word expert, because I don't know if anyone is really an expert on anything. We're all trying to spin you from our perspective. And for someone who spends time in politics and geopolitics, maybe I'm a little bit jaded from that perspective. But I just look at a lot of people, especially in academia. I look at a lot of people where there's conflicts of interest. And the word expert just means often their ego, their ignorance, their fear, and a lot of the challenges that they face. And then they don't want to have their ideas challenged. Ideas always need to be challenged. There needs to be open debate and discussion. It doesn't mean I need to win. Actually, my preference is I need to learn. I need to get better. So henceforth, although I respect people who have the utility in the given skill set and have the experience, I'm still reluctant to use the word expert. There's much more that I don't know than I know, and I'm still curious and looking to figure things out. I will go back a little bit, Jan, to the capacity and capability. I think capability skills are pretty simple and straightforward to a degree. Managing finances, taxes, estate planning, business building. I think capacity sometimes can be a little vague to people in building that within the family and the rising generation. Kind of an underlying ability to adapt to changing circumstances, which relates to resilience, which is very important, adaptability, and I would say even emotional intelligence. So, going back to the core heart of your question, a chief learning officer, perhaps no matter what you call it, helps to bring the word family back in family. I think it was Scott Peppett, an executive and a married in family member to a prominent family, in writing a couple of years ago in Family Firm Institute, FFI, basically had a formula 60, 30, 10. And I'm going to get it a little wrong, but maybe 60% finance, 30% legal and tax, and 10% of the family office dedicated to the family. And then when I spoke to him, we're like both agreeing we're being generous at that 10%. But the family is the family. The family is the word family and family office. There needs to be much, much more than at best 10% of efforts going into that for capacity and capability learning within the family. The unit, no matter relatively how small or large, at the end of the day, families will fracture for the reasons that we noted. Not having a shared vision, a purpose, a constitution, a buy-in from all members, not just written documents. I could have AI that can now do a pretty good job of writing up those documents, actually.
Yeah.
I share in it the right information. I then iterate it. I challenge it. I run it through another program. I bring it back. It's good. It's probably better than 80 to 90%, honestly, of professionals out there. But that's just the document. How about the activity of listening, of having emotional intelligence, of engaging the rising generation, of making sure things are going to be implemented and followed through, and that you have the courage to speak your conviction? All these very, very important topics that for now, AI may do a pretty darn good job, maybe bordering on great, on the actual documents, but it's way more than just pieces of paper. So the traditional family office model, as I kind of hinted earlier, is probably becoming more and more obsolete, partially because it was designed for the perception of stability, but not really control. It manages wealth, but never really manages wealth creation. And that goes on to the rising generation, certain fears they have. Perhaps we could argue, debatably, maybe my word's a little harsh, but the lack of courage. And these are all things that are going to be very, very important. Now we could get on to other nuances to your question. The traditional CEO, the person running the money in a complex family office, is often very, very well paid. Do you think a chief learning officer is as well paid as a big time investment person in a multi-billion dollar family office? Of course not. One may be making seven or eight figures, the other is not.
Yeah.
Yet, family is the most important thing in that family office.
Yeah.
So, there needs to be greater communication, connectivity. There needs to be greater alignment. And there needs to be an understanding within the family and the family office. And there's a massive disconnect now. Most family offices are well meaning with good people, but that doesn't mean they're optimized. And if you just go by the law of averages and best practices, most are going to be in the middle, which means from the exact middle, debatably, half are worse than average. Like that's and what's the average that you're even comparing to?
Yes.
Which is the challenge of best practices and benchmarking, which does have some value, but in the family office world is more limited than in most other industries. First principles thinking, taking things from the ground up, breaking them down and building them up and understanding them and what my goals are as a family, not the next family or that family there, my goals. So it's not easy, Jan. Within the family or the family office, there's a lot of work to do. There's lots of room for improvement. The world is in utter chaos. AI is changing everything. And most families are not iterating enough, engaging the rising generations enough. And they could do so much more and so much better.
I'm absolutely with you, and let me argue and let me add this point, and maybe you are with me, and it is just a question. If we take a look just for a minute on AI and family offices in regards of investments decision, if we are facing just the next wave of new family offices, I mean, we will double, triple, maybe quadruple over the next decade, and undoubtedly the existing family offices and maybe also not my, and also the new family offices are standing in an increasing competition amongst the best investment opportunities. And if I say maybe, and it would be interesting to pick up you on this. I mean, you in today's world, you can invest in a lot of investment opportunities, but many of them, let's call it this way, 80% are average, mediocre. They are pure investment opportunities. But if you don't have the capability as a family office of the future to have access to the top of the food chain, to the best of the best investment opportunities, you are losing money, you are losing your grit, you're losing your state in the competition. How can AI help these family offices to improve and speed up their position in this race? Call it this way.
Another
Correct?
complex question,
Yeah.
Jan, that there's not necessarily an easy answer on. I And going a little bit back and forth on that, someone who invested in the lowly and boring S&P 500 and index fund, or a little more enticing with technology, whatever, the NASDAQ 100, just passive indices over decades have beaten by far most active, talented managers we know managing billions, at least net of taxes and fees. And a lot of private deals, although sexy and enticing, a lot of people would have been better off and a little bit more, I would almost argue, boring. There's a story that I told in June when the Los Angeles Lakers in America, the NBA, which is a universal sport. So, unlike soccer and football, I could maybe talk a little bit as a better analogy from that perspective. The Los Angeles Lakers were purchased in 1979 by the Bus family, approximately 66 million. They were sold late this spring for about 10 billion.
Hmm.
But during that same time frame, if I put the money in the S&P, a boring index, admittingly a great roaring market, I get it, over the last couple of decades, I would have had about the same return with no singular risk. Now, if I had the opportunity to invest more technology in the NASDAQ 100 or some indice that would be reflective of that came about in 1986. But if I could backtest that to 1979, I would have about 3x'd, three times the amount of money I would have got from owning the prestige of an NBA franchise, the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, would I have had an owner's box, the prestige of hosting people, certain net operating losses on various LLCs? True, that complicates matters, but strictly from a pure investment return perspective, the public markets have done very, very well. As we're recording this, gold has had a banner, 2.5 years, but especially this year and the last year. Now, all that being said, yes, I understand the Mag 7 driving a lot of the returns in the public markets. And AI, that train has left the station. It's going to impact and touch everything. AI, as Andreessen mentioned, is underhyped. Underhyped. ChatGPT was just released, Jan, under 3 years ago, like November of 2022. We're not even 3 years yet. It wasn't really that good the first 3 to 6 months. It got better incrementally. Engineering talent, working the chips, the design, the fabrication, the energy expenditures, it's all accelerating. If it accelerates with compounding, every 6 months doubling, that may be a little generous, but I heard Jensen Huang of NVIDIA, something like that. That compounds to 64x after 3 more years. Supposedly, an IQ of the highest level of ChatGPT is about 146. What's going to happen when it has 64x more, let's go with the word horsepower, energy, resources behind it? It's obviously going to blow our intellect inevitably so far out of the water within 10 or 20 years, it may almost be comical. But I don't want to scare the audience, but I am saying that every industry is going to be impacted.
Yeah.
Inevitably, when it figures out fusion energy and energy costs drop to near zero, when robotics in 10 or 15 years are at an other level and production goes to what we would deem to be pennies on the dollar, how we even think about investing in capitalism, inevitably, whether I like it or not, inevitably is going to have to change. Now, yes, this all relates to the issue of families, rising generation, their utility in the world moving forward, and the capability of uniting and the purpose of family in a very, very fast changing environment. Again, ChatGPT, not even as we're recording this, not even 3 years ago. And it's gotten much, much better. People like me are able to go on a Lovable and code, or more applicably, build an app, a complex app, without knowing how to code because I just enter prompts effectively and it does that for me. The impact of AI agents replacing workers, working 24/7, and coordinating and synchronization are all going to be inevitable. Now we could get into a discussion about private deals in AI, about is it fair that at least in America, the what's deemed to be the non quote unquote rich or super rich don't really have access to it. They need to be an accredited investor or a qualified purchaser, a subject perhaps for a little bit of a different time.
Yes.
But to
Yes.
assume that AI is not going to have a drastic impact on everything, every investment, for the reasons that I noted, is complete ignorance. Am I a little early now? Probably. You're not going to feel that way in a year to year and a half. You're definitely not going to feel that way in 3 to 4 years. Things are changing very rapidly. And maybe more applicably in answering, which is why your question had a lot of nuances to it, Jan. As a family office, which is why I teach a masterclass and an immersion program on AI for family offices, you have an opportunity now. It's like learning how to drive in an empty parking lot. You wait 2 or 3 years, it's going to be like learning to drive on a big city like LA, which is terrible to drive in, trust me. You have an opportunity now to get the mindset, to get an edge, to engage the rising generation as an executive to enhance your skill set and use these services. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds why a family office needs to build a sovereign AI that doesn't train the model, that doesn't touch the cloud, and it's not that hard. We could save that for a different time. Learning development of applications, of AI agents, of how to have the right prompts, of how to have various systems, which is better for what, and battle each other. And yes, now in really answering the other nuanced part of your question, there is no question because I'm doing it, and others, some I know are incredible investors. I even know a VC firm that basically got rid of all their analysts. So, yes, you can use AI right now if you know what you're doing to have more forward thinking and a better process in the decision making of your investments. And that is never going to go backward. Well, God forbid we have nuclear war. Technology, my last comment, Jan, on this subject, you could feel free to follow up. Whether you like it or not, and I'm not saying I like it, but whether you like it or not, technology always, always wins. You could have some guidelines, some rules. You could protect your position politically. Inevitably, another country won't, and they'll win. And eventually, you'll acquiesce. Technology, in the end, always progresses and wins.
I am completely with you, Angelo. There is no question on this. And before we come to the end for our today's discussion, can you give me and also the audience just a flavor, maybe just as an easy example, if a family office is implementing AI, what kind of improvement on efficiency, but also what kind, maybe on a percentage base, what kind of competitive advantage they are using, and what is also the implication if you are using AI in the family office itself, what kind of implication that have into the family, just like maybe governance, I don't know. Can you give me just in the audience just a little picture, not too deep today, that should be a topic for our next talk, but just as an appetizer for the next episodes, just
Sure.
just as a feeling.
And maybe I could even almost self ask the question or looking at the camera for the audience, how long does it take for you to make a significant decision? Do you overthink things? Are you protective because you've already won, but you define that strictly only by wealth and capital? The rising generation needs to be courageous. The world is calling out for courage at the moment. So, in further exploring and answering your question, as a family, do you ever make a seven, an eight, a nine-figure decision? For families of wealth, every, well, maybe not every day, but every year. Don't you think you would benefit from having resources that are available that could help you make a better and faster decision? At the end of the day, it's already happening and it's going to get so much better every 3 to 6 months. You could do more with less, better, and faster. Period. Jan, honestly, I could probably stop there and let that sink in. You could do more with less, better, and faster right now. What is that going to be like in 3 months, in 6 months, a year from now? I'm an older man. I'm 60. I'm not naturally technology fluid. When I started to get more interested in hands-on and AI about a year and a half ago, but really about a year ago, maybe even a little less, I I had a fight again, like what are the words I used earlier? Ego, ignorance, and fear. Normal human emotions. And now I'm building apps. I'm commandeering AI agents. I'm having various AI or technically LLO programs fight, fight to give me the best answer. Knowing how to prompt, building sovereign systems, taking control where it's not training and up in the cloud. In other words, if I could do it, you could do it. And imagine the value of your rising generation who's going to be more understanding and fluid of the things that I'm talking about. And a lot of this does tie back to governance, which again, how are decisions made in your family? Who decides? Is it one person, a committee, a majority vote, a consensus? And then who has veto power? Is it like mom or dad can kill any decision, no matter of a formal sense of governance? And I go back to how long does it take to make a decision? And again, I think I'm going to go back to, I think it's such a great quote from Bezos. Stress doesn't come from hard work. It comes from ignoring the things that you shouldn't be ignoring. You should not be ignoring family and time and communication and engaging a rising generation. And you should absolutely not be ignoring AI. Well, we have indirect exposure through stocks and a little bit of VC. Bravo. Great. Do you really understand it? You know that it's underhyped. Mark Andreessen said so. Now, we could get into geopolitics, the US and China, from the perspective of the AI wars, and is the world really just an observer to that? And those are deeper geopolitical and social discussions that perhaps at a different time we could have. As you know, and I hinted earlier when I began, I am definitely not afraid to tackle subjects even without having perfect information, because I think it's important to have discussions.
Yes.
It's okay to be wrong. Don't be afraid of that. If you tally up the number of times I was wrong, even in my public comments versus I was right, yeah, I'm not so sure it's better than 50-50. And I don't know if anyone is really any better. They just don't want to, at least in the family office world, be as public in terms of some of their thoughts. Inevitably, what I'm talking about in AI, oh, I am 100% correct. You could argue my timeline. You could argue that. You're going to say I'm too early. You're wrong, but you could argue that if you want. So there's lots of nuances here, Jan. We can't tackle it all in 1 hour. We'll leave a little bit on the table for next time. And the opportunities, using a race car analogy, could you go from 0 to 220 miles an hour? Maybe, but you need the right skills, the utilities, the right mentors, and the right knowledge. So, knowledge that you're able to execute is going to put you in an incredible position, whether it's governance or AI. And some of those resources, and Jan's a great source, they're out there. You have to put in the time, the effort, and money. Like you have to pay for accelerating your knowledge to get an edge that may disappear in 4 years, 7 years, 10 years. If capitalism is no longer capitalism as we know it in that time or a little longer, 15 or 20 years, well, that changes everything. The meaning of life, the meaning of money. Those who have money, are the rest of us only on universal base income? Oh, Jan, lots of complex and interesting discussions that we just don't have the answers for, but we could be curious and bring up the questions. Perhaps next time.
Great.
Thank you, Jan.
Great. So I say thank you to you, Angelo, for this painting this kind of picture today. Yes, we have started to use the first colors, but coming back to your point, there are a lot of, on the table, and let's start our second episode on these what they are laying on the table. Just have a focus on the second episode on AI. And for today, many thanks for your time, Angelo. It's much appreciated. It's you are not you are under in the right position. I would call it this way, right? And it is not too late. It is not too early. It is now the time. There isn't just too late or too early. Now is the time. And that is just my closing remark for today. And I'm looking forward to have you very soon on the second episode. And for now, many thanks for your time and greetings to New York.
The pleasure is always mine, Jan. Thank you so much for having me on and appreciate you in the audience. Thank you.